Palo Alto. Malicious scan 15 minutes after CVE is released. Oh, really? The Palo Alto 2022 Unit 42 Incident Response Report makes the amusing claim that attackers typically start scanning organizations' perimeters for vulnerabilities 15 minutes after a CVE is published. Just like this. CVE 2021 Attack Surface Management Threat Report found that attackers typically start scanning for vulnerabilities within 15 minutes of a CVE being announced. End of quote. They do not write how exactly they got these 15 minutes, or I didn't find it, but apparently they could detect attempts to exploit some specific vulnerabilities. They could use honeypots or IDS for this, and then they could get the difference between the timestamp for exploitation and the timestamp for vulnerability publication. There is an example that 5 days after some vulnerability was published, they released a detection signature, and in 10 hours they collected 2,500 attempts to exploit this vulnerability. Quote, for example, Palo Alto Networks released a threat prevention signature for the F5 big IP authentication bypass vulnerability, CVE 2022-1388. And within just 10 hours, the signature triggered 2,552 times due to vulnerability scanning and active exploitation attempts. End of quote. It's cool, of course, but still the signature was not released immediately. Therefore, it is difficult to say exactly when the malicious scans began. But that's not the point. It's not so important whether the scans really start after 15 minutes or sometime later. The fact is that attackers monitor the news flow about vulnerabilities, and the fact that they are motivated to scan your perimeter more often than you, and they are motivated to use non-standard checks for this, not just the ones in your commercial vulnerability scanner. Therefore, there are only two options. You can compete in speed with attackers, or you may know and control your perimeter far better than any outside researcher can. This means that you must understand why a particular service is needed on the perimeter, and whenever possible try to minimize the number of such services as much as possible. For such services, you should specifically monitor security bulletins and start responding even before detection checks appear in vulnerability scanners. And of course, before the media starts screaming about this vulnerability. Of course, it is easier said than done.